Ivanka Trump's testimony in the New York Attorney General civil fraud trial is not going very well for her daddy. It ain't going well for her brothers. It ain't going well for the Trump organization. In fact, it is devastating to them. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. What's interesting about Ivanka Trump's testimony, and here we'll show you the video of her walking into the court while I talk, is that, she's very calm and sounds very rational, and it's very different than the theatrics and mumbling of her brothers and her father and the rantings and ravings. That's not what we're seeing at all. We're seeing fairly common, normal testimony being taken, but it's devastating what's being said. How about this? This could be a problem. That's a direct quote. This could be a problem. That's an email sent between Ivanka Trump and a Trump organization lawyer, Jason Greenblatt, that was introduced during the cross-examination of Ivanka. And that's referring to Donald Trump's inability to satisfy one of the loan covenants of Deutsche Bank that Donald Trump maintain at least $3 billion in net worth, exclusive of brand value. Ultimately, Ivanka and the Trump organization lawyers tried to counter with $2 billion. It was agreed upon that a covenant of $2.5 billion had to be maintained as Donald Trump's net worth exclusive of brand value in order to obtain these Deutsche Bank loans. So what number did Donald Trump ultimately put on his personal guarantee with the statement of financial conditions? Over $4 billion. And as the New York Attorney General Letitia James says, it's undisputed that Donald Trump did not have anywhere near the net worth of that. And as Ivanka said, when it was about $2 to $3 billion, that was going to be a problem. Another question that was asked to Ivanka, which is just baffling, that she claims she has no understanding here, except if you understand that her selective memory is probably what's taking place here. Here's the question. Did you understand that the Trump organization, by dealing with the private wealth management group at Deutsche Bank, was able to obtain a lower interest rate and origination fees than if they had dealt with the commercial real estate group? Ivanka's response is no. And clearly you would know if you were running major properties like she claims she was, and she claims she was responsible for the Washington, D.C. old post office Trump property and the Doral property. I think you would know the way private wealth groups work at Deutsche Bank, your lender, and being able to obtain better rates and better deal terms by being a part of the private wealth group. And then methodically, the New York Attorney General lawyer was just showing Ivanka documents. This has been a very document-driven cross-examination, and fairly politely in terms of the presentation. Ivanka's gone through document by document, but basically these documents being admissible has been devastating for the Trump organization. One thing to mention as well, Ivanka was showed an email between herself and Jared Kushner, which ultimately may be covered by what's called the spousal privilege if they were married at the time of these communications. But it shows that Jared was also very involved in providing insight and advice about financing terms, which should come as no surprise here at all. One of the interesting things is when the judge started off with the testimony and the prosecutor said, "The people call Ivanka Trump," Judge Engoron, who's been attacked over and over and over again by Trump and the Trump kids. Judge Engoron goes, "Who? Who is she?" And then the courtroom erupted in laughter. Going through the testimony of Ivanka, as I said, it was just very surgical by the New York Attorney General's office, establishing this pattern and practice where in the 2011 time period, the Trump organization was struggling to get loans on terms that they would ever agree to because people at that time were recognizing that the Trumps are not people you want to do business with. They had a history of bankruptcies. he was a failed business person and is a failed business person, but banks didn't want to deal with him. So the first series of messages showed all of these kind of alternative lenders that were all providing higher interest rates. And Ivanka was involved in that process in 2011. And ultimately, they got this relationship with Deutsche Bank. And Deutsche Bank required that in order for them to become a lender, that Trump maintain at least $2.5 billion of net worth or higher, and also offer a personal guarantee. And Deutsche Bank required that these personal financial statements and statement of financial conditions be turned over to make sure that they could enter into this lending relationship with him. And those statement of financial conditions that were then prepared were then used in subsequent transactions, where it's also alleged by New York Attorney General Letitia James that the fraud underlying this case, and this was also already adjudicated by the judge, that the fraud has been persistently taking place using a lot of the statement of financial conditions that were used back in 2011. And this is where the whole statute of limitations argument comes into play, because Ivanka was dismissed from the case on the basis of the statute of limitations. And just to those who haven't watched the MeidasTouch network or don't know what that means, that's the time frame within which a party can bring charges or bring a lawsuit. There's often finite periods of time. And for this particular fraud claim, the appellate division said that the statute of limitations, and all this stuff is codified, but with COVID, there was something called tolling and extensions, and the statute, there may be some legal questions over whether a specific statute applies in a given circumstance, but usually it's codified and it's not hard to figure out what the statute is. But the Court of Appeals basically said if you add up all of the tolling and with COVID and all of the extensions, and what you're looking at is about February of 2016 as the statute of limitations, and fraud being committed from that day and forward could be the subject of the New York Attorney General fraud case, and predating it, those were no longer part of the statute of limitations. It's not unique to the Trumps, the statute of limitations. This applies to all cases involving this type of fraud at issue. So because Ivanka's defense had always been, she was involved in these 2011 statements, but then she wasn't the one utilizing them after 2016, where she says she had no role in the Trump organization. That's ultimately why the appellate division dismissed Ivanka and why she's not in the case as a party defendant. She's a non-party witness. That's why she's no longer in the case. But then why are the Trump kids and Donald Trump in the case? Because they would then use the fraudulent representations that were made in subsequent years where the fraud was committed from that February 2016 date forward. And what Trump was arguing on the statute of limitations is, and the Trump kids were arguing, is that if the underlying fraud occurred in 2011, it should always be reverted back to that date. And what the appellate division said is, no, that is an instance of fraud. But if fraud is persistent and you then keep on utilizing a fraudulent statement for further fraudulent purposes, after the date it was the initial lending document, the transaction took place, then that persistent fraud is now within the statute of limitations. And so the fraud may have originated in 2011, but it continued to be utilized February 2016 to the present, not by, according to the appellate division, though not by Ivanka. Her conduct predated that February 2016, and then her brothers, who were then appointed as co-trustees, and then Donald Trump later, that they were the ones who were the ones engaging in the fraud. Just so you understand what the statute of limitation argument is there. So the New York Attorney General's lawyer going through all of these documents methodically, one by one, with Ivanka here, and just demonstrating the fraudulent documents, the purpose of them. One of the final things I'll just mention about her testimony thus far and why it's been devastating is all these documents are coming in that shows why the Trumps, the intent, why they engaged in this conduct, how desperate they were, what a failed business person Donald Trump was. And one thing that's being referenced a lot, though, is that Ivanka spoke with the New York Attorney General's office back in 2022. Even though it's not a deposition, she showed up for an interview And so it's not like the New York Attorney General has surprises here of what Ivanka is actually going to say or not say. But again, it's been a methodical takedown of the Trump organization through documents showing the internal problems at the Trump organization, showing why it had to ultimately make these fraudulent covenants and how that impacted the later fraud that we then saw with her brothers and her dad, who were just completely unhinged in their testimonies. That gives you a full framework of where we're at now. We will keep you posted as we learn more. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 2 million subscribers thanks to your support. Check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.